Good evening, 47. Your destination is the Paris Fashion Show by Sanguine.
Hello, my name is Billy, and today I'm going to be talking about Hitman 2016's first level, Paris. Today's video will discuss everything that is within the Paris level that can be checked off as objectives, as well as the aesthetics, the layout, the targets, and escalations. I've pretty much completed Paris, although I'm sure there are plenty of other interesting things in the peripheries. I'm going to use the checkboxes of challenges and escalations as a guide for trying to see everything.
The show is just about to start. This is the red carpet event of the season, and the guest list is a veritable who's who of the global fashion elite.
Our first mission, Showstopper, will take place in Paris, specifically in what one assumes is a stately home of sorts, but it's currently being used as a high-powered fashion show by a group that goes by Sanguine. Sanguine is a cover for an intelligence broker who uses their status to both find and distribute their covert gold, secrets, as well as high-class, prestige fashion brand. Funny, when you sell clothes to the rich and famous, you must hear some interesting things in the shadows.
Seek out Jessica and do what you do best.
We have two targets, Viktor Novikov, a Russian oligarch.
That is Viktor Novikov, head of Sanguine and ringleader of Iago.
And Dalia Margolis, an ex-Mossad agent, ex-fashion model, and current distributor of dark secrets. Quite a pair. The actual location is an old, stately Chateau Palais de Wallawaska. Apologies for the pronunciation of this, well, albeit made-up location. It is a slightly converted building that was a museum and is now a fashion show. One of your targets will be overlooking the ongoings whilst mingling with guests, whilst the other is conducting a secret auction in a heavily guarded, invitation-only section of the Palais.
Mr. Kruger?
The fashion show is accessible, presumably with the guest pass that 47 has, but there are limits to this pass. The grounds, upstairs and behind the scenes are all guarded from your starting position. First, let's talk about the aesthetics of the Paris mission, as I think they say a lot. In the Palais, decadence is tied to the powerful, the history of France projecting power from the 1800s to the modern day. The actual aesthetics of the area have been tied to the Palace of Versailles, originally constructed as the home of the royals to show off their immense wealth to France, but also to keep conspiring courtiers close. That was before the revolution. The whole Palais is steeped with history, but as a modern recontextualisation, it is detailed and a great introduction to the sorts of places we'll be visiting in Hitman. Showing off wealth was key to these sorts of buildings. This sort of Baroque style became popular as power started to centralise and monarchy became absolute. The UK has a similar thing with stately homes, areas of immense wealth for the super rich of their time to live in, and if you've ever visited one, you can see this style being projected in the Paris level. It's very similar. These aesthetics themselves were political. The flooring has intricate tile designs, works of art on the walls and ceilings that took hours by masters, and one hell of a fountain. All of this craftsmanship costs money. Money that if you are spending on this means that you must have it to spare. The gardens are perfectly manicured in a style that I've always found too perfect, too domineering. I'm not sure about the history of France, but in the UK these sorts of gardens were often to show a colonising power, bringing back rare species to own and grow, a sort of symbol of prestige. All of this conversation of aesthetics has a point here. Tying all of these real world history and connotations into a video game very successfully tells us a lot. Even though this building is now a freeze frame of the past, a capture of wealth and prestige, this is now being co-opted by Sanguine. They are using the past to present the same forward, into the present. This is now their wealth and prestige. If the era was made famous for this aesthetic style that projected violently wealth, the Showstopper mission also shows another side. The centre of this building is being consumed by something else, a modernist catwalk for a fashion show. Dark, moody and clean aesthetics are brought in contrast against the rest of the location. This sort of wealth no longer is fighting to be displayed, it's minimalist and trying to say a lot with less. This black heart with thumping EDM is Sanguine taking over the Palais in a very public way. Even, as I noticed at one stage in my playthrough, blocking out the sun to create a space for the fashion show. All of this display of wealth is contrasted against the back end, the gubbins that make it all work. Something of a common theme, the facade only stands if you don't see the other side. And you pretty much always need to see the other side in Hitman. This is where your targets hide, where your opportunities lie. But this is the section that make the fancy parts work. It's the downstairs in Downton Abbey, the parts people want hidden. These areas are busy, cluttered and most of all, functional. The kitchens, behind the bar or the locker room are all like this, places given over to the normal person as the rest wouldn't function without them. They all keep up with some level of finery, but it's much less on display. Some of the areas with the highest density of wealth are upstairs. What is more important than showing off to Joe Public? Well, showing off to your powerful friends, of course. But with a little more thought, this feels wrong. The people upstairs are having meetings as equals. The wealth displayed is just the Palais itself, instead of any externalising by Sanguine. Instead, these are the people that value secrecy. The real important part here is not the wealth, that comes as expected. It's the several layers of guards leading here, the showing of firearms and firepower. That's the projection of power here. There's also the section in the attic, a part forgotten, where the security detail is sequestered. Old paintings and statues are tucked away in places no longer thought about. Probably worth a lot of money, but not as much as what they choose to display. It's all in disrepair, home of rodents. The location and surrounding area must be, well, very expensive. I'm not super familiar with Paris's geography, but I do believe this location is pretty central as it's on the Seine and the Eiffel Tower is looming if you know where to look. The fact that the front is on a busy street shows its location also. The whole of the aesthetics do so much for this level. It solidifies the types of power and wealth being displayed by the types of people that would show it here. You can almost imagine the conversation discussing where this event would be held, the moment of agreement. Well, of course it would be the Palais. We're also brought it to an area that's interesting to look at visually, but it also dictates how the space is going to work mechanically. The aesthetics of the power fit in with the mechanics of Hitman almost perfectly.
I don't believe we've had the pleasure, Mr.
Reaper. Tobias Reaper. I'm a friend of Victor's.
I see. I wish I had been informed. Well, no matter.
The targets themselves. Let's start with Dahlia. To me, she is presented as the brains of the operation, interested in running the covert aspects that stay hidden in the upstairs area of the auction. This makes her both unavailable to the general public and Agent 47. Dahlia is dealing with the auction, a mole within Sanguine, and various other pressing matters.
This is bad. Oh, I gotta run.
Are you okay?
In contrast, Viktor Novikov is presented as the muscle, but typically that sort of dumb muscle who's got himself in trouble. He is shown to be hiring a hitman to get rid of an FSB agent who is close to exposing Iago, the intelligent aspect of Sanguine. But the very fact of him doing this signs his own death warrant with the shadow client, an aspect of the story we'll probably go in depth with later. He is a sort being used and seems less interested in doing what Iago needs and more interested in showing his face in a flashy style. He's one of the first things you see in the level, a clever nod at his own Iago. His most pressing concern seems to be to get himself his favourite drink. There's not much to go off when you're looking at the relationship of these two targets, but Dahlia clearly enjoys the intelligent aspect of Iago more, where Victor is much more into the fashion side of things. There is something underpinning their relationship together, there is something that binds them, but they seem more at odds now.
Worth it.
So we've talked about the targets and the way the level looks, but how does it come together as a level in itself? Levels in Hitman come in various different flavours, styles and setups. There are many different ways that they face the public, and ways that they have hidden parts. Two things that are essential to Hitman levels. I'm going to favour talking about these levels as a whole, and try and create a set of parameters to define them, and how we think about them. The red carpet entrance leads you through all of the public facing parts of the building. This includes the catwalk, a bar and a terrace. The rest of the area of the building fall into two categories: the gubbins that make the level go, and the top secret, undisclosed, must never be seen meeting areas, as we sort of discussed in the aesthetics part. With this in mind, I would like to characterise the whole level as a fascia for a public event, one that is invitation only. You have the areas on display, the fascia, the front that everyone is meant to see. It's dressed up and protected on the edges with guards. And then you have the bits behind, the part that you do not normally get to take part in, unless you're either a worker or an organiser. For instance, with this type of level, you have whole sections dedicated to organisational purposes. The car parks with delivery trailers, whole sections that you would normally not think about and only becomes important through the eyes of an assassin. There is an event here that needs to be catered, people watered with expensive drinks and protected with high power guns. In terms of how it actually plays, this opens up to different types of options for disguises. We have workers of various types, some I imagine working for various catering companies and the such. We have the guard class being brought in to manage the guests, as well as protecting the high-powered auction. There are the chefs that operate the kitchen of the main building. There are staff specifically for the auction, as well as people in high fashion for the catwalk itself. The setup of the location, the activities taking place, all inform the different types of disguises and approaches available for Agent 47. There is also a trick to this level that I would be remiss not to mention: the ledges. They are pretty much around the entire building, and for whatever reason, when shimmying along, guards really don't mind you being there. This oddity in programming proves to be the key to getting into all sorts of trouble throughout this level. The sorts of trouble that would normally require a disguise. In my experience, each level has a few tricks to them, ways to think about them that unlock how they operate, so I would like to cover them in these videos. I've already mentioned that we'll be using the guide provided to us by IO to explore the Paris level, and this comes in the missions but also the challenges. I briefly showed at the beginning of the video the menu that has all the challenges in it, and each of these is a set of stories or mechanics within the level to uncover, using separate components of the level to figure out how they interact with each other. Honestly, they're the best part. They're great. Trying to figure out how this world operates and how we can fit it together to get the outcome described in the challenge section is the reason that I kept on playing through this level to such a great degree. As they are the primary focus of how we're playing through this deep dive, I thought it'd be interesting to cover some of the best challenges in Paris. The titular challenge, the showstopper, is probably the challenge that stands out the most to me. It feels synonymous with the level. It's also one of the first challenges not given you directly as a mission. You have to read a note in the level itself to discover what you need to do. The note says that if the lead fashion designer, Sato, doesn't turn up, then Victor himself will go out on the catwalk and do a speech. Well, let's take care of Sato. Sato doesn't deal well with the stress of running a fashion show and is in a state of anxiety and stress. So when I put a coin in this diorama, he's gonna flip out. To calm his nerves, he will walk to one side and take a swig of a drink, perfectly poisoned ahead of time. All we need to do is wait in place for Victor and, well, stop the show. The other challenge that I think is very notable is the dropping the chandelier on both targets at once, or the safe room explosion, as I achieve both of them in the same manner. The key part here is not how they are killed, you see. This matters not. It's the transporting them to the safe room. To do this, you must collect the keyword that triggers the evacuation in the basement, and then message it across them. But this can't be done off any old phone. It must come from Victor's lead bodyguard's phone. You have to watch him and his routine for weakness. He likes snacking on this sushi an awful lot when he passes. Take him out, get the phone, and trigger the response. The reason I like this one and the showstopper so much is it exemplifies additional mechanics that are hidden within the level. There are enough pointers and guides in the level to get you going and suggest what needs to be done, but you have to put these together yourself. It's a good example of why playing these levels extensively and covering everything they have to offer is consistently rewarding. It's also just fun to infiltrate your opponent and dictate their moves to your advantage. But this is also a part of the reasons why I do leave the story missions on. Yes, they are heavily guided and kind of will get you where you need to go to finish the mission once, but it is a decent starting place to find the solution components for these more complicated challenges. The last main challenge that I struggled with was dropping the chandelier on Dahlia during the auction. It's got to be done right at the beginning. Now initially I thought the best way to do this was to get the secret Iago pass that someone had left in a toilet, book my way up to the auction and hopefully drop it on her in time, but there really is no time to do it this way. Especially as there's guards that will frisk you for a weapon on the way up, meaning that you can't take the direct route. So you have to bring your outside meta knowledge and progression in the level to be able to start directly in the auction from the beginning. It's not something I thought of straight away, the solution wasn't immediate. From there it's relatively simple to step outside the auction onto the balcony and drop the chandelier onto Dahlia. There are 2 secret feats in this level that act as this Where's Wally style hunt. One is the image of a fountain called Be Careful What You Wish For, another a picture of a vase called Bull in a China Shop. It took me a minute to get the first one, where you of course have to flip a coin into the fountain. The second requires you destroying the vase. Neither of these have any more information than the image and the title, meaning it's a bit of a hunt to figure out what to do. But I really like this style of challenge because it asks the players to use the clues to understand what the developer intent is. It's fun to ponder these as you take on other challenges. They sort of sat on my backlog till quite near the end of getting this level done. So something we've talked about a lot is different ways that the developer gets you to interact with all the components of their level. I want to talk about a particular challenge that significantly extended my playtime with Hitman 2, the Silent Assassin suit only on professional difficulty. I discussed it in the intro video briefly, but it's where you have to get the Silent Assassin rating using only the starting suit, one of the weaker disguises in the game, on the hardest difficulty where enemies are the most alert. You need to understand the level, the targets and your opportunities to try and pull it off. I'm sure speedrunners can do it in a matter of seconds, but my joy is trying to puzzle it out. Interestingly, in Hitman 3 it's not a recognised challenge, but as I love it so much I want to complete it in each level as we go through, and maybe rate which one has the best one. My method of completion for the Paris mission brought together the In Plain Sight, Terminal Velocity and Playing with Fire challenges. The Playing with Fire is the most essential to all of these, so let's start there. It's basically starting the fireworks show on your own terms. I snuck around the Palais using its secret key, the ledges, getting myself to the second floor balcony on the far side. From here you can path out the guards to sneak and grab the controls for the fireworks. These controls set off a brilliant fireworks show, one that both of the targets want to see. The Plain Sight challenge asks you to kill each of the targets within 10 seconds of each other with a sniper rifle. So this is where I learned to bring them both out to see the fireworks show. But this wouldn't get us the Silent Assassin classification. But we do know now that this exposes both of the targets, so that's one part of the puzzle. The next part uses the Terminal Velocity challenge. I was doing this separately as part of the challenges for the video, and what you need to do is push Dahlia from a height onto Novikov. As I pushed her I realised I could get up to where I needed to without a disguise. Funny, I can get the firework controls without a disguise also, so bringing these two together I can complete the challenge. I hope that this sort of demonstrates how completing the challenges and the missions brings a map knowledge of components that you can use to your advantage. It was only doing all of these aspects separately, with disguises first, that made me think that I could use them in tandem. The process is one I love, and it's part of the reason why there's so much value in repeating these levels. It's not just repetition, each time you may learn something that you can take forward to something else. These challenges affect each other. So how do I rate this one? Well, it wasn't the worst to figure out. It requires a level of finesse that's fun to enact on. You often end up feeling like the character in a heist movie who perfectly knows how to avoid all the guards, exactly where to walk at which moment, which is a good feeling to have in a game. That final moment when you complete your challenge has that similar reaction to a Dark Souls boss when you finally take them down. So, I would rank it top of our list of the levels we've done so far.
Both targets are down. Great work. Now head towards an exit.
We have one last thing to talk about before we start drawing some conclusions on the Paris level, and that's the escalations. Escalations use the existing maps, taking away the context of the mission and layering on new and interesting objectives. This can be taking out a target that was previously just a civilian on the map. This then escalates. You now have to take out that target with a knife. Well, next you have to take out 2 targets, but you can only change your disguise once. They keep adding on layers. They ask you to think about the knowledge you have built previously, but out of context. Knowing the best routes, weapons, or disguises become essential to try and complete any of the escalations. You need to consider everything you thought you knew. It's a final test in some regards. I'd never previously actually engaged with any of the escalations on any of the levels, so I wanted to try and devote a bit of time to seeing them through, and I'm really glad I did. They provided some of the more interesting moments I've had in Paris. First, we have the Coty paradigm. Named after the speedrunner, it asks you to use a battle axe, a weapon that you cannot bring into the level with you and have no way of hiding, and is highly visible, to assassinate people the other side of the map of where it's found. It asks, can you traverse the level within these stipulations? I quickly realised that the workers areas, the kitchens, although hostile, have less people in them. You can stealth your way through these areas with a greater amount of ease. This proves to be the key, especially when required to take out the Sheik without using any agility abilities. The kitchen proves to be the connective tissue you need to use. I really like what is asked of you here and how you have to deduce the solution. It adds towards the escalation being the final test of sorts. The knowledge of the level itself led to my completion. This is especially true with the lack of agility skills like mantling and shimmying. It completely wiped out my current plan on the next escalation and forces you back to the drawing board. The tea temptation is one that feels like a more natural escalation, with simpler stipulations being added in each moment. None of them quite make you completely rethink your total plan, but they do add interesting spice to what you're trying to do. You have to kill this security guard, and then another, with the greater and greater amounts of stipulations. There's an increased camera density. You have to use certain weapons, certain disguises, all in all elevating this level a crazy amount from the beginning. It ends up getting hectic. Speaking of hectic, the Corky commotion is the definition of hectic. We are disguised as a clown, and we've got to baseball bat helmet Kruger. And then 10 guards. We're also got to pop a certain amount of balloons, so make sure to bring that silent pistol in with you if you want to get this one completed. I thought this was going to be a massive pain in the backside, but in the end it actually ended up being less of this careful plan and more just swiftly formulating my next step as it was happening to me. Which is not how I normally play Hitman. It was a lot more of a reactionary style. Which is no bad thing. I love it when a game changes what I need to do and how I need to play it. Last one's the Vidal Cataclysm. It's taking out this piano guy with added layers of stipulations in regards of what you can wear. The key thing with the disguises in this particular level is that they only last a certain amount of time. So this means the entire time you're shuffling which disguise you're wearing and how long it's going to last. With by the end getting complicated enough that you've got to have several changes of uniform. So now we've briefly spoke about the escalations, I think thinking about them as a test is correct, but they also have another purpose that we've not really discussed. They extend the shelf life of each of the levels, adding in more content that happens to be less authored but still provides a challenge. There's no creating map changing things, like calling up on Victor's bodyguard's phone to put both of your targets in a single location. But instead of that fine-tuned programming that goes into the main Hitman levels, it allows this more hectic freeform style. And they're kind of amazing. When taken with the context of everything else done in Paris, they really ask you to use everything you know, while still changing enough to force you to think on your feet. It's slowly becoming one of the main things I'm looking forward to in future levels. So let's bring all that together into some conclusions. I love the form that the game takes. Being asked to play in all of these different ways ends up changing the playstyles of the player quite drastically. Normally I'm the sort of person who reloads on every error, but as I'm here to complete challenges, as I'm here to complete escalations, I don't do this because I can still succeed at what I'm here to do. The game gets a continuation. You can see this in the Corky commotion escalation. I didn't formulate a clever plan. That isn't to say there isn't some level of care. The solution to so many of your problems needs to be done with careful consideration of the death equation. What parts do you add together to subtract your target from existence? There are so many moments that I haven't shown in this video where I clearly knew what needed to be done, and I would be loaded into the level looking off into the distance and thinking. You try something, see the flaw in that particular plan, and reconsider. I know that the escalations can be looked at cynically as a way of extending shelf life, and they do this, but practically it isn't just this. They ask you to think of the level in a unique way, to consider the density and within and see it all. It answers the question that is sometimes at the heart of all game development. What is the point of developing an expansive world with unique content if the player doesn't get to see it all? Well, of course some people are not going to see it, but with the correct incentives you can make it interesting to do so. So often when playing a game, completionist type mechanics introduce grind. But instead here we're talking completely new lenses to view entire levels as a reward for the process, with additional challenges that ask you to then use these lenses. That's enough on the subjective experience of playing in this way. What was Paris actually like? Paris starts the process of looking at the rich and powerful in Hitman. Think about it, your target is never someone who just cheated on their wife, you're always a pawn in the power game. Part of the joy of these games is being amongst people you shouldn't be, realising that they're just shitheads and killing them. Paris also starts the series staple of having a location and a story of the level affecting the mechanics of the player. Now, the solutions you can have to various problems fall within a relatively standard toolset. You've only got so many different poisons and bombs. So if you come across a problem, you often know that the solution must be something you have. But my memory is that these aspects of each level get more and more complicated the further we go into the series. It's also important to think about how the setting affects you flow through the level too. The places you can access, how you move through them, are all different because the level is a fascia for an event. The fact that the auction is on the top floor matters. The fact that the catwalk is where it is matters. The fact that the bar is where it is matters. There are different levels of ease and difficulty to access all the areas, and different types of items found in different places. You don't find poisons just out on the bar, you have to go into a delivery vehicle around the side. The types and styles of frictions that can be put into a level are distinct because of where it's set. As starts the series goes, Paris is probably my most played level. I have come back to play Hitman several times across its years, and I always at some point in that process play Paris again. It represents some of the most outrageous, in the best possible way, level design. The aesthetics are killer, with all the contrast between old and new. The targets are just interesting enough to hold it together. The sense of show, but seeing the dirty workings underneath it all brings it together into something that is one of the best Hitman levels I've played for this series of deep dives that I'm doing so far. Talking of best levels, join me next time for Sapienza, Italy. Often considered one of the greatest levels in the series, we're here to take out a genius scientist with deep psychological trauma and the specialist trying to control and learn from him. There also might be a laboratory hidden somewhere in the level. This video has taken a great deal of effort to produce. I didn't realise going in that producing something to this level of quality takes the amount of time it does. As a measure, it's around an hour a minute of content. And I'm looking forward to doing more, but just know it takes up a lot of time. And if you have enjoyed it, it would make me very happy if you could like and subscribe. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. My name has been Billy. Goodbye.